Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. There were many Black people within the life of the Prophet Muhammad. In this segment, we want to discuss what role they played, what significance they had within the community, and how the Prophet treated them. Dr. Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
It's my pleasure to be on.
Now, let's talk about some of these companions who happen to be Black. Dr. Shabir, could you give us a bit of a rough outline of what the companions' names were?
Yeah, there were several persons who have very prominent positions within Muslim hagiography. We have perhaps the most famous among them is Bilal. Bilal was an Abyssinian person. He was a slave. There were many slaves at that time. And Islam would encourage people to release the slaves and even make it mandatory, especially as a penance for certain misdemeanors for Muslims to release a slave, which sometimes meant that they didn't have a slave, they'd have to go out and buy one and set that person free. But yes, there were slaves owned at the time, and often the slaves were people of dark complexion. Bilal was a Black man, and he was owned by a woman who did not take kindly to the fact that he had embraced the religion of Islam. And she used to hire people to beat him up in order to persuade him to leave the faith. But he stuck to his faith. It is related in Islamic history that these tormentors would drag Bilal through the streets of Mecca, but he kept repeating one, declaring his faith in the one God, while they were prompting him to believe in the several gods of the vast pantheon of Arabian gods at the time. So Bilal's story continues to be told in mosques and in Islamic circles in a very prominent way to this day.
And sometimes we use Bilal, I think, because he had such a prominent role, to say that Islam doesn't have any racism. Muslims are not racist, right? But, Bilal, it's not just because of Bilal. There are other people as well within the Arab community and within the Muslim community who had prominent roles.
Yes, and before we leave Bilal, if you don't mind, one of the things that has left a legacy for Bilal is the adhan, or the Muslim call to prayer. Our viewers will recall that during the month of Ramadan, some special concessions were given to mosques in the Greater Toronto area to be able to pronounce the Muslim call to prayer from the mosques at the sunset time. So that was for a limited duration, but nonetheless, Muslims see the call to the Muslim prayer as one of the symbols of the Islamic faith. And even our non-Muslim viewers will appreciate that often this symbol of the faith is associated with mosques around the globe, so that if we're watching a movie or a television show and the scene switches to a Muslim majority environment, one of the first things we might see is a mosque, and one of the first sounds we will hear is this Muslim call to prayer going, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, God is the greatest, God is the greatest. Now, the very wording of this call to prayer actually is credited to Bilal in Islamic history. It is said that the Prophet, peace be upon him, was asking his companions as the nascent Islamic community was forming in the Prophet's new city, Medina, how should we call people to prayer? Because the Muslims noticed that other communities had their distinctive calls. One community called for prayer through the shofar, the horn, and another community called to prayer using a bell. So what were Muslims to do? And then Bilal came up with this suggestion, which he said he saw in a dream, that we should call these words. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, not only approved of the words, but appointed Bilal to call them out. And he became, as we all know in Islamic history, the first mu'adhin, or the first caller to prayer. So whereas we're all trying to maintain that tradition to this day, we know Bilal to be at the root of this tradition, and we know that the very words that we are pronouncing are credited to him in our history.
And I believe he was the mu'adhin throughout the Prophet's life, right?
Yes.
The caller
and it is
to prayer.
Yes, it is even reported that after the Prophet, peace be upon him, died, Bilal couldn't stay in the city anymore, and he left because of his fond memory of the Prophet. He was always very close to the Prophet. Sometimes. Because he was strong, the Prophet, peace be upon him, would take some support from him as he stood up for his lectures to the community. And,
was he also
Bilal,
responsible for preserving the communal funds?
Yes, he was there in charge of the communal funds. So that shows that the Prophet, peace be upon him, had great trust for him. And he was well respected within the Muslim society.
So did it seem like the Prophet was making any distinction between, blacks and the rest, the rest of the community who were, I guess, lighter skinned? We see how the Prophet Muhammad kind of gave Bilal a very high status and didn't seem to notice or care that he was black.
Yes.
Did he do that with others as well?
Well, yeah, there were other people from other racial origins and distinctions as well, which were included in the close circle of the Prophet, peace be upon him. It is actually noted that on one occasion, the Prophet, peace be upon him, was eating from the same dish with three companions of distinct origins. There was Abu Dhar of the Ghifar tribe. There was Bilal, as we already mentioned, from Abyssinia. There was Suhaib from Rome, and there was Salman, the Persian. So they were all together in this, eating from the same dish. Nowadays, obviously, we want to eat apart because of the possibility of contamination and so on. But in that society, given the norms of the day, it was natural for the Prophet, peace be upon him, to eat together with his companions in this style. What is remarkable, though, is not the eating together so much, but the fact that they were from these diverse backgrounds and that the religion of Islam brought them together in such a harmonious relationship.
So it wasn't just a monolithic community. It was, different elements were coming to join Islam and join the community as well.
Yes, that's right. And as for there being other persons who were black in the companionship of the Prophet, peace be upon him, there were other individuals who have also left a very important mark in Muslim history. To be a martyr for the faith is considered in many of the religions to be a very important distinction, so that we have, for example, Justin the Martyr is called just simply Justin Martyr. He's honored with this title because he was killed due to the fact that he was a Christian. Now, we find in Islamic history as well that this kind of noble death which is obviously one doesn't invite, but which is due to the oppression of others. This is also recognized as an important mark of distinction. Now, the first person to have received this mark of distinction in Islamic history is a woman by the name of Sumayya. And she actually was black, and her color actually does not mean anything for Muslims when Muslims are thinking about her honorable status. So her honorable status is despite whatever color she might have had on her skin.
So was she a servant, a slave, or what was her origin?
This aspect I'm not so clear about, but I know that she was one of the early Muslims together with her husband Yasir, and they both suffered persecution, and Yasir himself was eventually killed. Now their son Ammar bin Yasir was a young man, very attractive as a young man, it is noted, and here too, despite his blackness, he was still described in the Islamic tradition as being attractive. And he too suffered martyrdom at the hands of the enemies of the nascent Islamic community.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's so much more that we could discuss about this, Dr. Shabir. There's so many other Black companions of the Prophet Muhammad, but I don't think we can get to them today, perhaps another time. Can you sum up, can you give us a picture of the way that these individuals were treated within the Muslim community at the time?
Yeah, and perhaps something that is worthy of mentioning here, Safia, is especially for our non-Muslim viewers, like why are we concerned about the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him? So I want to give some perspective on that. It's almost like we're thinking, who were the disciples of Jesus on whom be peace? Because these were the first recipients of the message and the most authoritative teachers of what Jesus left behind. Now, in a similar way, Muslims adore the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And so when we're talking about these persons, they're persons of great importance in Muslim society. In a way, I hope our viewers will excuse me for saying this, that Muslims feel themselves more closely attached to the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, than some other historical figures might be revered in other religious and faith communities. We want to follow their ways because we take them as being the exemplars of what it means to be a Muslim in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And as we aspire to be like our Prophet, peace be upon him, and sometimes we feel we can't be exactly like the Prophet because after all, he was a prophet of God, right? But and we can't all be that. But the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, who followed him so faithfully, they become role models for us as well. And among these role models, we have these persons who were known to be persons who were Black, and yet when we speak about them and hold them in high honor, we do not see them as being Black. So we're colorblind when it comes to the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, in terms of the love and the respect that we have for them and the honor that we bestow upon them.
But perhaps now looking back, we shouldn't be so colorblind. We should try and see, how people actually were, and to realize that, the Prophet Muhammad treated them that way, even though they were Black. And perhaps we can honor people that we see, around us in the same way.
Exactly. So we need to make more efforts to celebrate these Black companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And we need to also look internally to see if we, in our own circles, are welcoming persons of color and Black persons in our midst as the Prophet, peace be upon him, would have welcomed them.
And giving them leadership positions as well. Thank you for your time, Dr. Shabir.
You're welcome.